Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to try out some vintage fragrances on camera. I've not gone too old school. Most of these are 80s or 90s. I would say most of these are 90s fragrances. And yeah, I just was thinking about my collection and feeling that it was quite limited by the fact that most of the fragrances I own are 2000 or later. So I've just been inspired to make this video because I've been watching the fragrantician, Gabby, and I've also been watching Veronica Says, and I just really love their channels. I think that they've got a way of talking about vintage fragrances that makes me feel the enthusiasm for them and has piqued my interest, has made me want to try them. So this video is the result. So I've got 4 vintage fragrances that I've bought to try out. Let me tell you, it's a mixed bag. Some of these I am really regretting purchasing, and some of them I really think that I'm going to really enjoy using. So the first fragrance I'm going to talk about is Miracle by Lancome. Now I feel like I'm on quite safe ground with this one because I've seen several YouTubers talk about this one. I've seen Chantal Tiffany talk about this one. I think I've also seen the fragrantician talk about this one. I think this is a reasonably friendly vintage fragrance, so I think this is a good starting point. Released in 2000, the bottle really sort of gives you that impression, doesn't it? It's very clean lined, very millennial. So the notes in this fragrance are lychee, freesia, magnolia, pepper, ginger, mandarin, jasmine, and then jasmine, musk and amber in the base. I would describe this fragrance as a fresh, spicy, floral fragrance. I think probably because of those watery florals in there, the magnolia and the freesia, that's really what I mainly get from this perfume when I first spray it. I think the ginger and the mandarin really appear later on. So it initially starts quite watery and then it becomes warmer and then more spicy with the ginger. I didn't think I was that bothered about this fragrance until I'd worn it a couple of days, and yeah, later on when you get the dry down, it's really beautiful on your skin. It's not a massive projector at all. This one is quite a gentle fragrance, but it does last a long time on skin. I'd imagine someone wearing a crisp white shirt wearing this fragrance. It feels very clean, very professional. I think it's definitely something that you could wear to work. I don't think you're going to smell old school per se. I think you'll just smell elegant really wearing this fragrance. I did notice when I was reading about this, Thurman was the person who advertises in the 2000s, and I can't really imagine anybody who I would associate less with this type of fragrance. It doesn't seem edgy enough for her, but maybe she's a crisp white shirt wearing person and I just don't know about it. So that's Miracle by Lancome. I would wear this one. I do like this one. So the next fragrance is one from 1998, and this fragrance was actually formulated by one of the 3 perfumers that made Miracle. So this fragrance is Romance by Ralph Lauren. So romance is meant to reflect the scent of romantic love, of joy and happiness. And I would say again that this hinges on the watery florals, but it also has rose. So the notes for this one are rose, chamomile, ginger, lemon, freesia, lily, lotus, white violet, carnation, musk, oak moss, exotic woods, and patchouli. So I would say that this fragrance is definitely a chypre fragrance. You definitely get the oak moss in the dry down, but the opening is just about the watery florals and about the rose for me. It's a very kind of green rose with a chamomile, and then later in the dry down it becomes more gingery and lemony. And yeah, the oak moss definitely comes through. It feels quite like a fresh aquatic fragrance in the beginning, and it's weird because you wouldn't think of it as an aquatic fragrance, but it does just feel really, really watery. Despite it feeling aquatic, it also feels like a heavy floral, this one. I wasn't really quite prepared for how heavy this fragrance feels, given the notes. I would have thought that you know, things like rose and freesia and things like that would be quite light smelling, but in this fragrance they're somehow not. I don't know how they've done this. It's some kind of magic. So I would say the best part of this fragrance is definitely the dry down for me. So it's a musky, woody fragrance, but with that oak moss as well, and you're left with those, like the remnants of the watery florals as well. It's really nice. I really like this fragrance. I don't think I'd buy a full bottle. I don't think I'd want to have this as my signature or anything. I feel like it's a bit too grown up and sensible for me, but you know, I think maybe I might grow into this one. So that's Romance by Ralph Lauren. So the next fragrance that I've bought is probably one of the most iconic ones of the 80s. So this fragrance was released in 1988, and I've heard Happiness Sparkles talk about this one. So she says that this fragrance reminds her of having her children and having them grow up, and it's been one of her signature scents since the 80s. So I was kind of intrigued by this fragrance, so I just went and tried it. So the fragrance I'm talking about is actually Eternity by Calvin Klein. So I don't know about anybody else who's my age, so I was born in 84. I just remember those kind of iconic black and white adverts in magazines of this couple on a beach, and it was advertising this fragrance. And yeah, I remember trying this fragrance a number of times in magazine pullouts. You know, you'd have the open flap thing where you'd have a little bit of the fragrance. And having tried this again, it's nothing like I remember from the magazine pullouts. I think with the magazine pullouts, you basically smell the magazine pages at the same time, don't you? But yeah, I haven't tried this one since probably the early 90s. So this was a complete revelation for me, this one. So I think this fragrance is really famous for having a lot of carnation in it. And I think carnation was definitely an 80s note, wasn't it? Because you don't really find that many carnation fragrances today, I would have said. The carnation kind of lends it a bit of a warm, spicy feel to it. I don't really understand how carnation is used in fragrance, because to me, when I smell a carnation in real life, they don't really have any scent. They're just, you feel a coolness with carnations, but in fragrance, they seem to be quite spicy and sort of almost, I think they're described as smelling like cloves. And I would really, really agree with that, because I'm not a massive fan of cloves. So I can see that that's something that I'm having trouble with in this fragrance. So this fragrance, as would be expected for an 80s fragrance, is a complete mishmash of notes. And I'm going to read them to you because there are a lot and I won't fit them all on the screen. So this fragrance is supposed to have green notes, freesia, sage, citrus, mandarin orange, carnation, lily of the valley, narcissus, marigold, violet, rose, jasmine, heliotrope, musk, sandalwood, amber, patchouli, and the kitchen sink. Yeah, this one to me is a bit of a shapeshifter. So initially it feels quite spicy and quite warm with all that carnation. It's also bitter and herbal smelling to me. It smells very unisex in the opening. It's almost minty. I know that sounds weird, but yeah, it's on the edge. I think because of that spiciness, it just gives me a kind of minty vibe. As it dries, it becomes more rosy and more floral and even a bit powdery or soapy, but the carnation is still there. I wore this one last night and I half enjoyed it. There were bits of it that I actually really, really enjoyed. Like the opening is too much for me. About 10 minutes in, it's good. And then, I don't know, in the dry down, there's just something that I don't like and I can't work out what it is. I don't know whether it just is the carnation, because I think that is the troublesome note for me. But then if you're someone who hates cloves, you're probably going to hate this fragrance because it just does smell a bit like cloves. So I wouldn't say I really can't stand this fragrance. I just say that it wouldn't be one that I would choose to wear. I think that it's one of those that clearly was a classic for a reason. It clearly was groundbreaking when it was released. But yeah, I think it's just a bit too herbal for me. This is incredibly long lasting though. One spray is literally nuclear. It's got really good projection, really good lasting power. I have no idea how long this 100ml bottle would last me. Yeah, this is kind of like a one or two sprays kind of fragrance, because it really is nuclear. Calvin Klein said that this fragrance was meant to reflect his marriage, and that's why it's called Eternity. And I think the people in the magazine adverts that I was talking about are actually married themselves, and they've redone the magazine adverts for later releases of Eternity. So they're Christy Turlington and her husband Edward Burns. So do I like this fragrance? I'm on the fence. I like certain aspects of it. I don't think it's something that, had I smelt it in a shop, I would have bought. But yeah, it's an interesting journey. I'll put it that way, and I can see why it's a classic. So that's Eternity by Calvin Klein. So the final fragrance is breaking the rules slightly, because this one is from 2008. And this one, even though it's not technically vintage, because I would say that anything over 20 years would be vintage, to me it smells vintage. So the fragrance that I want to discuss is actually Calvin Klein's Secret Obsession. No, it's not a garlic bulb. It's in this really, really hideous bottle. I don't know what would have possessed them to make a bottle quite so awful as this one. It's got a really cheap plastic top. The bottle itself is glass, thank goodness. This one, when I first smelt it, I was instantly hit by the resemblance to Beyonce's perfume, Heat. I thought that this perfume was basically Beyonce Heat, just less sweet. And Beyonce Heat, I wouldn't say was that sweet actually, as celebrity perfumes go. So this one is even less sweet than Heat. And this perfume, I would say, if you are not a fan of plums, don't even bother. So I was reading about this fragrance, and actually it's really controversial. The advertising for it was done by Eva Mendes, and apparently this fragrance is supposed to represent every woman's intimate desires, apparently. The adverts for this involved Eva Mendes kind of riding around semi-clad, basically. It was so controversial that a couple of advertising agencies telling Calvin Klein to tone it down a bit. The TV ad had to be toned down to get it through, basically. Secret Obsession, I think it's trying to be a sexy scent, but I don't really feel like it is a sexy scent. So this perfume I would describe as something that smells like a boozy alcoholic drink. It smells like a fruity alcohol, like something like a fortified wine, like a sherry or a port. That's initially what I get, and I think that's basically the plum at the top of this fragrance. So yeah, like a boozy plum kind of alcohol. It really does make me think of, you know, going to my grandparents at Christmas and being offered sherry, and that's not really what I want from a fragrance, really. It's spicy too and really warm feeling, and I think there's nutmeg in this fragrance and maybe mace as well, and sandalwood, so that's probably what's making me think that it's warm and spicy. Do I like this fragrance? I think that plum is a troublesome note for me because I've noticed that I am not the greatest fan. Beyonce's Heat is actually, I find it more palatable than this one because it's slightly sweeter, but I would say that they're both in the same kind of family. There's a definite resemblance. It's definitely the same vibe, but it's not anywhere near the same fragrance. So would I buy this fragrance again? No, I don't like this fragrance, but I think that's just because after the opening it becomes a little bit sort of dusty smelling, and I don't really know what that is in this fragrance, but I don't like it, so no, wouldn't buy this one. So that's Secret Obsession by Calvin Klein. So as part of this video I also bought Davidoff Cool Water Woman. That was released in 1996, but unfortunately the bottle that I bought was actually off. I've never ever been burnt on eBay before by a fragrance, but that one really was off. It was well off, so I chucked that one away and I went to Superdrug and just sprayed it on a card. So I can work from this card, but yeah, I would say that Davidoff Cool Water Woman attracted me because of that video that I did on aquatic fragrances and how to make fragrances feel watery. And Cool Water Woman is really famous for having a lot of cologne in it. And yeah, I was just intrigued to see what that smelled like. And I sprayed it in store, and I just have a memory of it smelling really, really fruity but also really fresh. And I didn't really notice the kind of aquatic vibe really, other than it just smelling fresh. It didn't smell of the sea, it didn't smell salty, it smelled just fruity and fresh. So on the card, the main thing I get from this is probably the pineapple. I think the pineapple really does stand out even in the dry down. It's just kind of lightly sweet as well in the background. So I'd say that, you know, the vanilla and the kind of the freshness and the pineapple are definitely the things that linger. And, you know, I went to spray this maybe 3 or 4 days ago and I can still smell it on this card. So it's a really, really long-lasting perfume. I would really consider going to buy this perfume if I didn't have all of these other ones. But, you know, I think that Davidoff Cool Water Woman is a really, really affordable perfume, but a really good one, you know, just for a gym scent or, you know, something to freshen up. Really refreshing for the summer. Definitely regret that this one was the one that was gone off. I really wish it had been Secret Obsession. But yeah, I really enjoyed trying this one. I think it's probably the most mass appealing of the fragrances that I've tried. So yeah, would recommend Cool Water Woman. So just to summarise, I think probably my favourite amongst the bunch is probably Lancome's Miracle. closely followed by Ralph Lauren Romance. I can definitely imagine Ralph Lauren Romance as a wedding scent, for example. I think this one would work really well as a wedding scent because it's got that kind of chypre kind of class about it, but it's also got the rose and the freshness. And Eternity, not that bothered. Yeah, there's something in it that I'm not sure about, but I can see why it's so well regarded because it does stand out as very different to everything else I've tried. And Secret Obsession is clearly a no. And Davidoff Cool Water Woman, yes, I like that one. So thank you for watching. Let me know which vintage fragrances you love and which ones I should try. And which ones you miss. Are there any that have been discontinued that you just really wish that you could smell again? I'd really love to know. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't done already, and please press the like button if you have enjoyed it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!